Okay, so there is one question regarding hoisting. So while I'm giving you the recap, I will explain the hosting again once more. So yesterday we started talking about function, and then we said, okay, there are a few important differences regarding JavaScript functions compared to other functions in Java, C, C++, other languages. So the main function, one of the few differences are that in case of JavaScript functions, you do not have return type. A single function can return multiple data type values from the same function, of course, something like this. It can return a number at some time it can return string, anything, even boolean, string, number, objects, array, anything. It can return anything. So that is one way. The second one, even if you don't pass anything here or you don't return anything from there, it is kind of returning you undefined as well. Then of course if you just do the blank return statement, then of course undefined will be written. And then we started talking about how to define functions. Of course this is the way where you can define a global function, or if you want to put that function on the properties of an object, then of course you can do that one as well. You just have to assign an anonymous function to the property of the function, property of the object. And then yep, you can call the function in the same way that you will refer to the property, but still at this time, since it is a function, you can call it. And then of course if you want to pass something to that function in the arguments, you can do that one as well. And another way, just because you just saw that an anonymous function can be assigned to a property, so of course it can be assigned to a variable itself, a variable as well. So that's what we saw. And then you can call the variable and then the function itself. Then of course we saw two different ways of defining function, and if you use in this particular fashion, then one will return you some exception or error, the other will be working properly. And the reason is just the hoisting, because here you are declaring a variable, and then after that you are assigning a function to that variable. But what is happening here, this function one variable is being hoisted on the top, because since it is in the global namespace, of course it will be hoisted to the top of the global context, which is probably the first line somewhere in the global context. And then at that time it is not assigned a function, so of course you cannot call function type like this on an undefined value. So that's why you were having error in this. There is nothing such error. And then of course if you try to figure out whether some property or some variable, what is the type of that one, so of course you can use type of operator, and then if you compare it with the string function, then of course you can determine that this guy is a function. Then some unique properties regarding calling of the function. So and number of parameters, of course there is no parameter matching going on, just like you have in the strictly typed languages like Java and C and C++. So here you can pass as many as parameters as you want. If you pass more than that, all other extra parameters will be ignored. If you pass less number of the arguments, then of course the remaining ones will be initialized to undefined. And then even though the arguments array, which is available to all of the functions, and using that array you can access all of the arguments passed into that function. But still this is not the best practice, but it is just for the reference here, that's it. And you shouldn't be using arguments. Try to use your arguments or your parameters, not the arguments array. Okay, then we started talking about variable scope. So as I said, there are only two levels of scope in case of JavaScript. So the one or the lower one is the function level scope or the local variables. So for that, whenever you declare a variable inside a function using the var keyword, it becomes a local or the function level variable. Now of course, remember that in case of JavaScript, there is nothing called block level scope. Oh sorry, this one. So if you declare some variable inside that, well, it's no longer there. Actually it is defined, it is hoisted from here, and then it is defined at the top level or at the first line or at the top of the function definition. So it is available everywhere. Of course the assignment will still be here, but declaration goes to the top of the function. So there is no meaning of something called block level scope. There is no block level scope in JavaScript. And again, remember, always declare local variable using var keyword, or I will even say, declare global variable as well using the var keyword. So always use var keyword, whether you are declaring a global or a local variable, doesn't matter. Now, few things regarding global variables and how they can affect. So of course, if you want to declare a global variable, just declare outside any function and it will be available to the entire application in all of the JavaScript files, no matter if they are coming from different servers, different domain, doesn't matter. All global variables are attached to the window object, so there is nothing. So window is your global thing actually. So there is nothing outside window object in case of your browser or browser tab or browser window. So for every tab you have a window object, and then whenever you define a global variable or a global function, they are all assigned or they are all attached to the window object as properties. And again, you can check using the in operator, and this is for any type of object property relationship. If you want to check whether this property is defined on this particular object, well, you can just use in operator and then it will say true or false. Again, be aware that if you initialize by mistake or you try to declare a local variable but you don't use var, well, then it is no longer a local variable. It is now a global variable, and if there is another global variable outside with the same name, it will be overridden with this value. So remember that thing. And then yep, this is the same thing. Here you are kind of overriding jack, so of course jack with the value bar. So that's why you will see the local as well as bar, the outer or the global as well as having the value bar. Now what happens if you are working very properly? So you are using var keyword, but still you are using same name for the variables. One is global, other is local. In that case, JavaScript will make sure that whenever you try to access my name here inside the function, it will refer to the local instance. And then if you go outside and then you want to refer my name from outside the function, then of course it will refer to the global one. So that's for sure. Now this is the hosting, and I think when someone has a question on the hosting. So what is hosting? Well, hosting is lifting of the variable declarations at the top of the function. So if you define something, if you use something like this, so what we are doing here in this function is whenever someone is calling this function, we say, okay, just use the variable my name, but as you can see, we have not declared that variable yet. But on the next line, we are declaring it as well as we are initializing. So if you think that, okay, it may result in some error, well, it will not. It will just print you undefined. The reason is, in case of JavaScript, all the variable declarations are lifted or declared at the top of the function. So if you do something like this inside the or deep inside your function, then of course all the wherever you use var, they will all be picked up and will be defined at the top level, something like this. And then of course your assignment will be as it is on the same line. And so now you can think why your console.log in this case will print undefined, because since it was not initialized, and by default if you don't initialize any variable, the value or the data type assigned to it is undefined. So that's why you see undefined printing here in this case. This is just the example how JavaScript will treat your code if you write something like this. Now again, function declaration, if you are using the same variable or same name for the variable as well as the function, their order will define what type of this show name becomes at the end. So if you are defining your variable first, or declaring rather, and then you are defining the function with the same name, you are kind of overriding the show name property here, which is only once on the window object. So first it was declared as a variable, and then it was replaced as a function. So of course if you try to check what is the type of this show name right now, whether it's a variable, undefined, string or something, then of course if you do something like that, it is a function and no longer. And then of course there is nothing called conflict. So you can put as many as declare as many as variables as you want, there will be no conflict. And in this case you can think, I mean, you have the same name for the variable as well as for the function, so there won't be any exception. It will work fine. Any question? Who had that question? Someone. Nikita, is it clear? Nikita,
Yeah.
is it clear?
Yeah. It is clear to me, the hosting. I was just running one code snippet. Probably I'll just ping you, and I don't understand that why it is alerting me then.
Okay. Do we have it right now?
Yeah, I'm just sending you it on the Slack.
Okay. So what we are doing here is we have a global variable with the value 1. Then we say, okay, if the value of the foo is not false, which in this case will be true, you come there, you try to alert, and then you see. So let's see what it returns. So of course you see 10. So what is the question? Why it's returning 10?
Yes. I'm saying that if it's not true.
So if it is 1,
it should give 10. Yeah, then if it is 1, then it should give 10, right?
it should, when it is 0, then it should be 10. If it's 1, let's see. Oh, okay. Now I know. So just make understand this logic of what? Hosting. So what's happening if you break it? The way JavaScript is looking at it. So of course there will be hosting. So it will be something like this, right? Now the value is undefined.
Undefined.
Now opposite of undefined is true, because if you try to evaluate undefined, it will result false. So opposite of that is true. Of course var is already there. Now the value is 10.
Okay.
So this value is never used. Even if you get rid of that, it doesn't matter. It will still give you the same result. Because as long as you are using var, you're fine. Not this. But if you don't use var, I mean inside declaration, then of course you're just having 1. Because at that time you are just overriding the value, but here you are not even coming to line number 7 in this case.
Okay.
Okay, because of the hosting, it's getting defined like this, and then since the value will be undefined, it will come inside, assign 10, and then you will get 10 in dollar.
Okay.
Okay. So whenever you have doubt regarding this hosting or something is breaking, just, or if you are trying to declare some variable inside a block scope and it is not behaving expectedly, then just try to declare it outside, because that's how your JavaScript will be treating your code. So just try to look into that one, and then you will clearly understand why it's happening like this. Because if you just say like this, you will be confused, like why it's coming inside the if condition or in the block, since you think it is 1, well, it is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just confused that while in hosting it just goes and declares on at the top of the document. I mean, even outside the function.
No, if it's local, then it will declare at the top of the function, just after the function, you can say, inside the function definition.
Yeah. Now I understand.
Okay. Another question, in this same piece of code, will the foo inside the function override the foo outside? Since it's inside the function, it should not, right? Well, we have already gone through this question yesterday, but again, since it's a local, or you have declared it properly, so of course there is no override going on. So if you try to use foo from outside, the outside foo will still be 1, the inside foo will be 10. You see one? So there is no override going on. If you don't use var, then of course there are so many things going on. Okay, any other question? Okay, so then we started talking, well, this was just a small quiz, which is same thing if you declare something in the for, that most of the times in Java, well, all of the time in Java or in C or C++, this variable I is considered local to this block scope. But it is again, in case of JavaScript, this I guy, well, there is no block scope. So of course this is now out of this block scope, and it is defined after or just after the variable, function definition, or the first line of the function definition. Just consider something like that. In that case, it is available for access inside anywhere in the function. In this case, you are just defining it outside, so even after your function is executed, that variable is still there because it's a global now, and you can access it. So we saw this example yesterday. If you have any question, you can try this in your browser and then go and watch the video for the yesterday. Then we talked, okay, how to avoid some of these common coding issues that your developer or you himself or yourself can fall into this trap. So the way to do is use strict, and you can use it at the first line or at the document level, or not the document, like the script level, or even inside the function. If you just want to be very specific for the function only and don't care about outside, then in that case just use strict inside function. You don't have to use outside. But if you want to enable strict mode for the entire script, then of course use it outside as well. Then in that case you don't have to use inside, because everything is in the strict mode if you use outside. Now it will of course catch some of the errors, including the var. If you don't use var while declaring the variable, it will ask you something like this. What about this type of errors where you are trying to delete your variable or functions just by using delete? Then of course without using use strict, it will fail silently. In this case it will throw you exception, which is good. If you try to use same properties inside an object, error there as well. If you're trying to override the arguments of objects, of course this arguments object is immutable, so it is not allowed. If you try to use or try to give same name to the two parameters in a function, then of course it's an error. So that's how you can use strict mode to at least get rid of some of the common developing issues. Then we started talking about closures. So we started saying, okay, closures are nothing but the inner functions or the nested functions, or inner or nested functions or closures, of course. And then of course they have access to the outer functions variables, of course their own scope, the variables of the outer function, and then of course the arguments of the outer function as well. So they can have access to all these different kinds of scope, and then at the end global variables are always accessible from anywhere in the JavaScript. So that's also true. Then kind of 2 or 3 closure rules. So first one is closure have access to the outer functions variable even after the outer function has returned. So in this case we saw, if we just kind of send a reference to the function outside, that means anyone from outside can call this function now by passing something. So that's what we are doing. We are calling showName, which is a parent function, and this parent function is doing nothing except initializing some things and then returning a reference to the inner function or the closure. Now you can get and it will assign that reference of the inner function make full name to my name, and now you can call my name because it is now referring to this function, and then you can pass the value, and then at that time these two variables are not undefined or null or something like that. They will persist the older value, whatever you have set using the parent function call. So they will all be there, and you can just access it. It will print something like this. What about another rule which says closure store references to the outer functions variable and not the actual value? So in this case, what we are trying to do, we have used closure here, and we said, okay, what if we can change the value? Will we get the updated value via the closure? So of course you get the updated value via the closure. That means the closure store references to the outer functions variable and not the exact value. So if something is changed on this shared variable or outer functions variable, then of course your closure will return you the updated value for that one. The reason being it shows the reference, not the value. Then of course there was one unique way or unique mistake that most of the developers may make, using or declaring closure or using closures inside the for loop, and also when you are trying to use the looping variable or any variable which may change inside the closure. So that's what we have the problem with. And now in the future, if you want to call it again, you will always have the updated value of the I, or the last updated value of the I, which in this for loop is 3. So that's why if you try to call it, you will always get 233, and this may throw you off your balance, because if you don't understand closure in this way or for this particular issue, then you may be confused. Now how to handle that? So before that we talked about IFI, or immediately invoked function expression. So of course it is a very awesome way to avoid global namespace and still keep your code clean, and then of course you can execute that function without giving it a name. So of course you are not, or the memory is wiped out from there, and then you are not even disturbing, or you are not even corrupting your global namespace, which is good. Now using the IFI along with the issues that we had with the closure, you can handle that issue. Now what you can do here in this case is you can execute the outer function immediately, so using an IFI. And in that case your index, well, it's no longer there after the execution. So of course your index will have the exact value and not any reference. So for that particular matter, it will work in this case. You will have 0, 1, 2, 4 as expected. Okay, so that was what we covered until yesterday. If you have any doubt, you can ask. Otherwise, I will start talking about some more things about functions for half an hour, and then probably we will switch over to prototype inheritance, one of the important concepts in case of JavaScript. Okay, so let's talk about functions a little bit more. So just like in case of Java, you have this keyword. So here in JavaScript as well, you have this keyword, and it's again very unique to JavaScript. So for example this. So what we are doing here, we have a global function called makeArray, and then it accepts two arguments, argument 1 and 2, and we are just returning an array with this argument 1 and argument 2. So of course this is the keyword, not some string or something. So that's what we are returning it from here. Then of course we are trying to see what this will refer in case of this function. So let's see, and when we call it, we can print it here. So we'll see what is happening. Something like this. So right now we are not printing this array that we are getting. Now we can print it. So let's just put console.log. So you see it returns window, comma 1, comma 2. Well, 1, comma 2 is already there because you passed to this makeArray function, and for the second and the third index you are setting the same values, but for the first one you set this. You just wanted to test what this is referring to inside this function. Now you see this is a window. Okay, so probably this refers to Windows always. Let's see if that assumption is true. Now let's try to do it with a normal object that you have created and then you have a function inside that object, same thing, but instead of putting it as a global function, now it is on the property of the function. So let's see what happens now. And then again I can print it. So there are two different prints going on. The first one is of course the global, the second one is array maker object, which has some property, and then a make function, similar type of function. Again, you are trying to see what this will refer in this case and what this is referring in the case of global function. So let's try and see what are the different values of this now. So in the first case you see the window, which is for the global one, and when you try to call the array maker, which is on line number 18, you'll see some object. Let's expand and see what is there in the object. So you see, okay, the first index in this array is an object, then 1 and 2. We are fine with 1 and 2. We don't even care about those. Let's just see what is there in the 0. So you see it has some make and some property, and some make property having a function. Well, if you see, this is the same object. So array maker object is at the 0 position, right? Because this is the object that has the sum property and make function again. So what you understand by the word or the keyword this, so it will always refer to the object where your function is associated as the property. So in this case, just in this case, so whenever you use this inside the object, well, you are just referring to the object itself, and then of course that's why you are getting this. This is getting reference of your object. So if you try to use this, you can just use it using this keyword. So let's say you want to access the sum property from inside this function, right? So you can just say, let's try to print actually this dot sum property. So you will be able to see some value here is there, because that is the value of this property, and then you can use the property of the current object itself using the this keyword. Now question is why we are having window on the global one, right? So again, if you remember, whenever you have the global functions, they are actually assigned as the properties on the window object. So if you scroll down into this object, somewhere you will have make array function or property actually here. So it is also this kind of behavior, right? So whenever you use this, now you can safely say that this will refer to the object where your function is associated as on one of the property. So of course this will refer to the object here. In this case, it is referring to the array maker. In this case, it is, since it's a global and every global function or variable is a property on the window object, so this is now referring to the window object. Okay, so that is the way you can use this, but it has just started. So now you can safely say what is the utility of using this. If you want to access properties from the same object where you have the function defined, well, you can use this and it will help you in that case. Now another example here. So you have one global function. Well, let's just copy this function actually and see different examples here. Okay, whatever, doesn't matter. Redefinition of name. Where do we find name here? Stupid. Anyways, so we have this global property or global value here, sorry, variable with the name, then of course the value JavaScript. We have a global function, generic greet, some sort of greeting, hi, I am, whatever the name. Now the thing to remember here is, or to keep your eyes on, is use of this word, this, or this keyword. Now you are just saying hi I am, and you're saying this dot name. Now as long as you are in the global namespace, this is referring to the window. So if you say, in this case you are just saying window dot name, now your window will always have this value as, or this variable as well as the property, right? Because it's a global variable. So it works well if you just try to run this without any other code. So yes, you can say something like, hi, I am JavaScript, because JavaScript is defined on the global variable which is assigned as a property on the window object. So as long as you are calling your global function, this guy will always refer to the window, and then you can access the name via this way as well. Just to show that this can be used in this way as well. So many this, right? Okay, good until now. What about changing few things or making a little complex? So what we are doing right now is we have two objects, Bob and Alice. Again, what we did put the name property on the Bob and said, okay, your name is Bob, and we said, let's put some greet function. Now instead of defining our function here, we just said, okay, refer to the same function where your generic greet is referring. So we are just saying refer to the same function. So we will assign this anonymous function to greet as well. And that's what we did here as well. In Alice, we created new object, put the name property on the Alice as, of course, Alice, and then greet, we said, okay, use the same function, right? So now we are just using it so that we don't have to write this function again and again here at two more places. Now the only difference is, or only thing that we may not understand right now, is this. So as long as you are in the global, of course it will use this name, right, or the name variable. What about when I call it like bob.greet or alice.greet? What would happen then? Let's see, and we will conclude something new, or we'll understand some new things. So here you see, when I called bob.greet, meaning I'm trying to call the instance of greet function from the Bob object. So of course it will go and call the same function, and this time it will say hi I am. But since this keyword here will refer to the Bob object, because you are calling from bob.greet, in that case this dot name will be Bob. So that's why you see hi I am Bob. And in the next one, of course, it will be referring to the Alice object, and then you will see Alice.name, or this dot name will be Alice in that case, and that's why you see I am Alice. And as long as you are calling the global one, of course it will go and check the global object, which is window object, and figure out the name JavaScript. So that's why you see three different behaviors from the same function, because the function definition is same, but only changing thing is the reference where your this is pointing to. So of course now this is some sort of basic understanding of how this keyword will refer to. So wherever you have function assigned as a property on an object, this keyword will refer to that particular object. Any doubt here? So yep, the thing is, your function is not bound until it is called. So of course the realization of this is happening on the runtime and not here, because if it was at the parse time or something, at that time this is still referring to the window, but this gets proper access only at the runtime. So that's why in this case, when you are calling bob.greet, you call this function, and this in that case will refer to Bob. Here it will refer to Alice, and that's why you see here I am Bob, I am Alice, and I am JavaScript. So this is another important thing regarding functions and using of this keyword. Now, so far when you want to call a function, you just use this kind of parenthesis, right? And then you say, okay, this is a function, call it. So which is good, as long as you are not trying to do something advanced. So what you can do actually, so there are other two ways of calling a function as well in case of JavaScript. Not just this parenthesis method where you, after the function name, you just use the parenthesis making a call, right? So there are two other methods in JavaScript, and the first one is apply, the second one is call. Now using these two methods, both of these methods, you use this to change the reference of this inside the function if you need to invoke them in different context. So let's see what I'm blabbering. So we have apply. Okay, so again you have some function definition, any normal function, but instead of using the parenthesis to call it, you are now saying some function dot apply. Now it accepts two arguments, the apply guy. The first one is reference to a certain object, and the second is array of values. So of course the first one is object, the second one is an array, and we are talking about apply this time. Now what is this object reference is doing here? So of course it is, or what it will do, whenever you call this function, inside that function this keyword will start referring to this object ref. And again, let's see the example in here. So we have the same function, we have something called make array, and then we are passing two arguments, and we are just returning an array with the first argument is this, the last two arguments are, or last two values are just the arguments of your function. So this is the same one. Now what we did actually, we created an object Gaze Guzzler, and we defined year 2011, model Chevy Camaro. Of course it is a Gaze Guzzler car. Now what we want to do is we want to call make array. So if you just make a normal call to make array, this keyword will be referring to what? Window object, right? We want to change this referring to window thing here, and we want to make sure that this keyword refer to some other object that we want it to refer, not just the window object always. So here we can use apply here. So let's see what will happen here. So what we did here, we have created one global function, and we said okay, create one object, two properties on that object, and we said okay, make array dot apply, because we are learning how to use apply. So the first argument is some object reference, right? So what we did, we just passed this reference or reference to Gaze Guzzler here. So okay, that's the first argument. What about the second? The second one is array of values. So what are these actually, or how they will be assigned? So you have these two arguments here, right? So what you can do if you want to assign values by using apply function, you can create one array and pass the values that you want to assign in this array, something like this. So of course you are using an array, and these are all comma separated values. One will be assigned to argument arg1, two string will be assigned to arg2, because it's an array, and that's how your apply function behaves. Now let's see what happens. So of course when you call make array, your Gaze Guzzler guy, now this will be used, or your this here will be referring to Gaze Guzzler and not just the window. And then of course one will be passed to arg1, two will be passed to arg2, because it's an array. That's how it will resolve itself, and it will return this new array with this arg1, arg2, and that's what we are printing here. So we have this thing. Now let's see what is the first one, the first value, which is an object. So if you expand, you will see at the first you have some object, and you have the model and the year, which is nothing but your Gaze Guzzler object. So now using apply, you have changed, or you have set, or the developer has said where this keyword should refer to now. So that's how you can use apply to change the reference of this inside a function. Because if you don't use apply and then you just use a normal way, so something like make array, and just pass two values here, 1, 2, then of course there is no such function. First of all, make array, and now you have to console as well, log it. So if you see the first line, which is at line number 9, it's printing the same thing, but your line number 11, well, it will start printing window. Why? Because you are not passing any reference, so this will be referencing or will be accessing the window object we just saw on the previous slide. So this is still the same behavior, but if you want to change that behavior, you can use apply. So that's one way. There's another one, or there's another function, not just apply, and that is called call. Now it is also the same, and also you use call for the same purpose of changing the reference of this inside the function. The only difference is, in the previous case we are passing an array of values. Of course it always has two arguments, right? First one is the object reference and second one is the array of value. So we pass the array of values. Now in case of call, you pass a list, as many as arguments you want in your original function. So of course there is no array, and this is the only difference. That's it. So what I will do, I still have the same one, right? So same thing, instead of apply, now we are using call, and you will see there is no difference. This is the same guy, model, everything is same. The only difference is, instead of passing an array as the second argument, you are passing all the arguments that you want to pass to make array, argument 1, argument 2, in a comma separated value. That's it. So the first object or the first argument is always the object reference that you want to change this, and then the second one in case of apply is an array which will contain comma separated values of all the arguments. In case of call, the second or all other arguments after the first one are all your normal type of argument. They will be just assigned one by one to your function. So that's what you are seeing here, and if you run it, no difference. Both are same, both are referring to the same guessguzzler object inside the function make array. So everything is same. Any doubt here? So again, this can be one interview question saying, okay, what is the difference between apply and call? So again, both are used for the same purpose. What is that purpose? Well, if you want to change where this keyword should refer to, so you can use apply and call. The only difference is, in case of apply, you pass an array. In case of call, you are just passing arguments one by one. Okay, this is also another example, good one actually. So some kind of interview question again. So yeah, you have this Bob object. So you say, okay, the name of the one property name, and then the value is Bob. Again, greet function, and you are saying, okay, function alert, hi, my name is, or whatever, hi, I am this dot name. Now you have Alice object, and it just have the name only. That's it. It doesn't have any greet property or greet property with a function like this. But you still want to achieve the effect of Alice.greet. So if you think of Alice.greet, it would be a property here with a function with the same structure and then this name. So if you call Bob.greet right now, it will return you something called hi, I am Bob, right? We saw this example 2 slides back. Now you want to have same effect, but instead of saying hi, I am Bob, now you want to say hi, I am Alice. But you do not have permission to modify Alice. So how to do that? So of course you cannot modify Alice, so there is no meaning of putting a greet property here and then probably referring to the same function here, or just copying this function here as well. You can't do that. So still you want to print or get an alert something like hi, I am Alice, without changing Alice, or of course without changing the name here. So how to do that? Any suggestion? No one? We just saw 2 examples of apply and call. That's what we can use here. So what we can do actually, we can call something like this, or we can make a call to greet function on Bob. So we can say bob.greet, and then we can say call or apply, whatever, since we are not passing any arguments, both are same in this case. And then instead of passing nothing, I mean, you can just pass a reference to the Alice now in any case. And if you try to run it now, this will be referring to Alice, although your function is associated with the Bob. But again, since you are using call and apply, you can achieve that effect. So if you try to run it, of course, you will get console or whatever we did. Oh, it's an alert. So something like this. That's what you wanted, right? Without changing the Alice object, you want to say something like, hi, I am Alice. So yeah, that can be done by using apply or call. So let's have 10 minutes of break, and then we will start the heavy duty session on prototype inheritance. And in those 10 minutes, you can go back to all the slides, whatever I have covered today and yesterday, and then you can try these examples in your Plunker or wherever you want, and then let me know if you have any question. Okay, so let's start talking about inheritance in case of JavaScript. So in case of Java or C or C++, well, not in C++, C actually, C++ and Java, you have class-based inheritance, right? So you create classes which are kind of straight static structure, and then of course, well, when I say static, I'm not talking about the static keywords in case of Java, so don't be confused with that one. I'm just saying static versus dynamic things. So in case of classes, in case of Java actually, or even C++, what you do, you create the structure, then you create the object using that structure, right? And then structure has no meaning if you don't create an object of that. So that's what you do in case of Java. Here in case of JavaScript, everything is object. So there will be an object, that means it has some dynamic behavior, and then you can inherit an object and create a derived object. So you don't have to have some sort of classes here to control the structure or to specify the structure. You can inherit object from object itself, and that's how your JavaScript inheritance behaves. So it's a lot different than what you have understood so far in Java or C++. So bear with me in this case. So again, and this is called the prototype inheritance. So let's start from the scratch. So again, JavaScript is a classless and dynamic and still object-oriented language. Although it is classless, the class keyword is reserved. So probably in the future they may be doing something weird with the class, but as of now, at least the ECMAScript until ECMAScript 5, or probably 6 as well, you won't be using class, but of course it is not required, but it is reserved, it is not allowed. But still, if you want to create new object, then what you can use, you already know, right? That's how you create an object. You say, okay, new, and this is an object itself. It is not a structure or a definition, something like class. It is an object itself, the real object. And then what you are doing, you are inheriting from a live object. So it's not something like a definition already stored somewhere. So you are inheriting from a live object, because JavaScript says, well, we don't care about classes, or there is no meaning of definitions or those structure which are static. If you don't create object, there is no meaning, right? In case of Java as well, you can have so many classes. If nobody is creating an object of those classes, there is no meaning of those classes. But here you inherit object from object. So again, the object is your highest level in JavaScript, just like you have the object class at the highest level in Java, and everyone inherits from the object class in Java. So here as well, everyone inherits from the object, or everybody is in sense of this object. Now that's how you can create, right? The other way we saw was using the curly braces, which is also good, and then the last one was the object literal, where we define properties inside the curly braces straightforward. So of course there are many ways to create an object. Now there is some difference when you use new versus something like that. Now there should be some definition, right, of this object. I mean, how or what is its behavior, what are its properties, all this kind of thing. And even when we do write object something like this here, we get all these properties. So who is setting all these properties on this one? And some may be your functions. So how can we set these properties and functions on the object itself? There should be some sort of definition, right? Well, your function does the same. So that's why JavaScript is called the first class function, first class function language. So because everything that you can do using classes in Java, you can do a much better thing using function itself. So again, before going into that, so I already talked about how to create objects. So there is this way, or you can create new object like this way as well. But you want to create object of your own definition. So what you can do is you can create a function just like this, and then from this function, if you want to create now an instance of this my object, you can just use new on the my object, and now it's perfectly legal. And that's how JavaScript constructor works. So you are kind of, when you say new on your kind of function call, but actually this is not a function call. If you see, as long as you are using new keyword, this is not a function call. If you remove new, then of course it is a function call. So your function behaves both ways in this case. If you use new, then it will just return an instance of my object and then assign it to here. If you don't use new, then it is just a plain function call, just like what we have seen so far. So this is the difference between this new keyword and not using new keyword. Again, the comment says all. Now if you want to again confirm whether this instance is what is the type of this instance, whether of object or a function, then of course you can see here, if you use type of, it will return you object. And you will also be able to use the another operator, instance of, which is just to check whether your instance is an instance of its parent object. So here you can do, and then of course it will return you the true. Something like this. So of course at this line number 8 we are saying what is the type of my object, which is, well, just scale, let us call it obj, so you don't be confused between two my objects. So of course obj is of type object and not some function, and of course it is instance of my object. So this is how you can figure out. And if you don't use new, then you are just gonna get undefined here. That's what you see. So because it is not returning anything, right, and you are not using new, in that case this is just a function call, normal function call. So it is returning undefined, assigning undefined to obj. If you say what is type of obj, then in that case it is undefined, and of course it is not the instance of my object in any case. If you want to see that, well, if you want to just get or create instances of your own definition, then just use new, and then in that case it will be object, and of course it will be instance of your parent object. I have one question. Where does it go, heap or stack? Good question. Everything is on heap. There is a Java. There is also a garbage collector. But function call will go on the stack. This is an object, so it will go on the heap. And that is also a difference. So again, this is proper instance. So of course there are no classes to define structure for your objects or something, they are just functions. So if you see the object itself, or array or string or number, all these data types, they are also defined as functions, and then you create new instances of those real objects. So this is one thing about classless. What is dynamic? We will see, and of course you have already seen something about object-oriented language. So we will talk about all these two terms, but in some time we will talk about why it is called dynamic and why Java is not a dynamic language unless you use reflection in case of Java. So let's see here. So what about inheritance then, right? Because that's what we are trying to learn. So far we have just seen how to create object, the different ways of creating object, different things. So what about inheritance? So of course we have some sort of definition here. Then what we do, we put some property, do something on that object, because it's an object, it can have property, so that's why we do it, or that's how we do it. We assign an anonymous function to that. That's perfectly fine. And then of course now you do something as a function with a console.log, I am your father's son. And then of course when you call it, well, of course you will be able to call this static kind of method. It's not exactly as meaningful as you have static things in your Java classes, but still it is kind of static method. Then you create one instance of your my object and call it another object, because you are using new, so of course you are creating an instance of my object. Now you thought, okay, this another object is an instance of my object, so it should be able to access the methods defined on the parent. So let's try if it's possible or not. Something like this. And the first call, which is from here, which is line number 8, which is via line number 11 actually. So it is, of course, it can call the do something function which is defined on my object, and you are calling it from there only. So of course it can call it. What about why we are having this error here in another object? When we try to call a parent method, well, we thought it may be the parent method, so it should be available. So we are trying to call it from there. Well, it's not available. It's saying undefined is not a function, so there's something wrong, or probably we don't understand proper things properly. So let's see. Let's just dir the another object thing and see its structure. So of course you see the type of another object. It's saying my object, which is good. You expand it and you see proto. So again, this is, we will talk about this underscore underscore proto and underscore underscore. It's a special property to go back or to go up, to move up into the prototype chain or hierarchy or inheritance up to the inheritance. So again, but you shouldn't be depending on this property because this is not implemented and this is not also in the ECMAScript. So of course all the browsers will not implement this. This is just for the browser's purpose. So again, let's expand it. So you see constructor is there, which is my object function, which is empty here, which is good. Then of course your my object is also inheriting something from the object. That's what you see, right? So your object, which is another object here, it is inheriting from my object, and my object again is inheriting from the object, and object has all of the normal properties that you will usually get. So where is this function gone? Do something where it's not even available here, right? But if you try to dir my object, you will see it properly there. So of course it is a function, so you see everything, do something is available here, so everything is there. What about here? Why can't you see even on this level, on the parent level? So of course you can see it here. Oh sorry, this is not the case, this, but you cannot access it from here, and the reason for that one is, well, we will explain what is the reason. So new instance of my object cannot access its static method. When I say static, means any method that is defined directly on the parent object, it is not accessible to the derived or the instance if you are creating instance via new keyword. So this is the thing that you have to keep in mind. So then what is the inheritance? Or before that, let's talk about this. This is another example. You have again the same definition, empty my object. You define function again. You say okay, another object, and you define the same name or function with the same name on the another object here, but of course something else. What do you think? Which one should be called when you try to access instance dot do something? This one or that one? The one from the parent or one from the scope of the another object? So we have already seen, right? The call from instance to its parent method doesn't work. So of course it will always call, hey, this is me. So if you try to display something like this, you will be able to see only this local method or this scope method or method of its own, the static method of the instance only, not to the parent, because we have already seen it cannot access the parent's method. If they are defined something like this, well, we are not even going anywhere near inheritance. I mean, if you cannot even access properties from the parent, then what inheritance are we talking about? So this is a special kind of inheritance, and it is called prototype. So what is prototype then? So every object or every function, I would say, has a prototype property. Not every object actually. Every function has a prototype property. So just like here, my object, it has a prototype property. If you define one of your property on that prototype object, which is internal object, okay, but you can access it of course, and then if you define something on that, only those properties which you have defined on the prototype of the parent object are available in the inheritance or to the inherited object. So that's what inheriting object actually. So that's what will happen here. So now you have defined do something on the prototype of the parent. Now if you create an instance of my object and you try to call do something, it will be available, because this is the way prototype inheritance work. And since the name is prototype here for the object, so that's why it is called prototype inheritance. So again, now it can access the one from its parent, and the reason is you have to define something on the prototype of the parent, and then only the instances can access it. So let's see the structure of another object now. So we have this, and let's see. So we have proto, we have this, and you see this method here directly available. Of course, inside constructor it will always be there. In the previous case it was always there, but now it is available outside as well in the on the prototype. So that's why the instance, which is another object, can access this, do something now. In the previous case it wasn't the case. So that's why, and that is how the prototype inheritance, well, kind of works here in case of JavaScript. So if you want to allow instances of your object to inherit from your parent object, you have to put those definitions or properties on the prototype of the parent. Otherwise they are not inheritable. So these are the things. So again, what is a prototype? So a prototype is an internal object from which other objects inherit properties when you are using new keyword. Okay, so again, your prototype property or your prototype object is available on the functions. Its main purpose is to allow multiple instances of an object to share a common property. That's why you use inheritance, right? Which is the basis of inheritance actually. Any doubt until here? Of course, I mean, there may be some confusing things, but now you understood why it wasn't happening before. Because in case of JavaScript, if you try to put properties directly on the object, they are not going to be inheritable. How to make sure that the properties that you put on the parent are inheritable? Then of course you have to put those properties on the prototype. Because when you use new, only so what it does, what JavaScript will do is it will create a new object, and on that one it will just copy the properties which are there on the prototype. That's it. And it will put that on the prototype of another object. That's what it is doing actually. So without prototype, if you put a property on the my object, well, that's not going to work. And we just saw the examples of this. So that's your prototype inheritance. Now this is just the starting. Prototype, is it a method? No, it is an object. So if you see something, if you try to log it, where is this? My object dot prototype. So if you try to log it, you will see it has constructor, which is same for the my object, and the only property that it can have is just the one that you have defined on the prototype. So it's an object, and that's what it is there. The do something, which is a function, different things inside the function, usual stuff. And then again, your my object is kind of referring to, or it is child of the object, right? The real object, the bigger object, or whatever you call it, the global object, not the global object, because otherwise you will be confused with the window here. So this is the main object, right? So yeah. So again, this is your parent object now, or sorry, prototype of the parent object. So if you put some okay, let's try some example, another example. So you have some prop like this, right? And so of course this is not on the prototype. So will it be available? So let's see here on the prototype. So of course it is not available here. The only thing that will be available on the prototype of my object is the things that you have defined on the prototype. And when you do new, what JavaScript is doing, actually it will find out the prototype of the parent and it will just create instance from there. That's it. Not the my object itself. It will create instance from my object dot prototype, which is another object inside one. If we define do something on another object, now how does it override the original do something function? So now if you define something like that, I think we already have on the previous, just copy paste. So now it's a perfect overriding. Why did I remove this? Okay. So of course now it's total overriding. If you want to check, another object, then you will be able to see it has a local copy of the do something, which is this, since you have defined on the object on the instance itself. And if you expand the prototype, there will be do something as well, and this do something is coming from the parents prototype, or just simply calling parents or the base object. So that's how even the inheritance or the overriding works in your Java as well, right? If the inherited object has its own method, well, that will be used, or if the base object method will not be used, because it will try to find out local first and then will go in the up in the prototype chain. So this is called prototype chain. I mean, you start from your current object, you go to the underscore underscore proto underscore underscore. It's very hard to pronounce this thing. Just call it proto property. Then you go again until you reach the last, which is the object. So again, as I was saying, don't depend on this proto. This is not part of the ECMAScript. This is not in the specification as well. And browsers have implemented, I think only Firefox and Chrome has. I have never checked this thing in IE, so I don't know about that. What about multiple inheritance? So yep, just hold your horses. We'll cover that one as well. So again, this is the thing. Now, again, I was saying this prototype thing is available only on the function. If you try to put prototype on another object just to make something like a multiple inheritance, it will not work. So if you use, first of all, prototype will not be available on another object. So let's try to put something, another dot prototype dot some property, and then say something like this. Of course, it will throw you some error before that. This error. Hold on. Yeah. So of course there is nothing called prototype here. So another is not defined. Well, sorry. Let's give this example now. So of course cannot set property name of undefined. The reason is prototype is not defined for the normal objects. This is only defined for the functions, or when you use functions for object creations, then only you can use it. Otherwise there is no purpose of, or there is no meaning of using prototype on an object which is created as an instance, or which is created using new. So in this case, of course, you cannot think of multiple inheritance here. And in case of JavaScript, multiple inheritance will only work in the browsers IE9 and higher, because there is one special property or method on the object now to enable that thing. We will talk about that. And these are only available in ECMAScript 5, and then that's why. Prototype is like extend in Java. Yeah. In case of Java, extend means inheritance, right? Yep. That is what I'm talking about, inheritance. So again, your function added to an instance will only apply to the particular instance. So that's what we tried to do here. So what we learned, or what is the next question then? Can an instance access a function defined on the parent's prototype even after the creation of instance? So this is some vague statement. Let's just go to the example directly. So right now we are trying to think about dynamism in JavaScript, or why it's called the dynamic JavaScript or dynamic language. So let's talk about this. So we have this object, which is nothing but empty, or the definition now, nothing but empty, and then usual stuff, we have do something on the prototype that we have put on the my objects prototype. Then we created an instance, so another object is created here. Then you are calling another object, so of course we have seen it will work, and then it will print I'm your father's son, something like that. Now dynamically, we are again, just after declaring this, we are trying to put another property on the prototype. And remember, this is happening at line number 17. Your another object was created at line number 11. Now you are putting this property, can this new function or will this new function be available on another object which was created before this change or before this assignment? So the answer is yes. Do something else is here. The reason is, I mean, this is how dynamism or that is why JavaScript is a dynamic language. If you change anything on the base at any time, all the objects that were, no matter if they were created before or after this change, they will all get reference to your newly added property on the base class. And the reason you cannot even compare it against JavaScript, Java, well, the reason is you cannot change classes on the runtime in case of Java, right? You have to go back to the class, stop the JVM, add the method, come again, and then run the execution again. So that is why. Otherwise, I mean, if you are not using reflection again. So reflection is the API which kinds of makes Java a little bit of dynamic as well. But otherwise, there is no possibility of making it dynamic, but here it is there. So yes, it can access this, do something else as well, which was even added after the object creation, so that's perfectly fine. This is the dynamism of JavaScript. Okay, too much. Let's talk about something more regarding the prototype inheritance. So while instantiating an object using new keyword, the new instance inherit from the parent.prototype, right? That's what we discussed, because in the previous example we saw that what we get actually on the another object is nothing but my object, a copy or a reference to my object.prototype, not a copy. Copy will be something else here. So rather than directly from the parent object itself. So that's what we have seen so far. Now let's talk about this versus prototype. So what is the difference between these two approaches? If you use this on some properties and then prototype on some properties on the base, right? So let's talk about this. So we have this parent definition where we are just saying, okay, it's a function. Again, you can define something like this as well, and you're saying this name is equals to unknown, this dot get name is equals to this. At the end you are returning this, right? What do? You go and create instance of this new my object, right? Now if you just print object1, okay, so since you are not using prototype here, you are just using this, you are you have created new object, will you get reference to this properties or functions? So of course you will get, and you will also say, well, they are not on the parent, they are directly assigned to the object1, because that's what we did, right? Because they are directly assigned here. You see, you don't have to return actually from here. Stupid. So you just define, and then if you expand it, you will see that these properties are directly available on the OBJ. If they were on the inherited my object, well, they should have been here, but you see there is nothing, and they are already copied here locally to this object, and this is copy, okay, true copy. It has nothing to do with the inheritance. If you try to create another object, you will see there are two objects, and they have their own copies of each one. So for example, if you say obj.1 get name is equals to something else, it will be changed only in the obj1, not in the obj2, because you are getting a true copy of this object. because you are using this. Now inheritance, the meaning of inheritance would be to share properties, right? So if it was inheritance, in that case it would have been, if you change something here in the name, it should be available in the object 2 as well, but this is not the case here. Object 2 is completely independent of your object 1 because you are using this, although they are both instance of the my object, but the reason is you are using this keyword. So this is one thing. So we are good until here. In the meantime, I'm just gonna remove this line from here. Actually, you don't need that. It's confusing. Nope, nope. Okay, so the first thing is, okay, we are good with this, so you will get copy or every instance of the my object having its own independent copy of the properties. So that's what we have seen with this. Now let's see what happens with the prototype if we put these properties on the prototype and not just on this. So let's think about this nature now. Any doubt in understanding this? We saw that, right? That you will have exact copies of all these properties on each individual object, and they are separate from each other. Even if you change something on the name on the object 1, it will not affect on the object 2. Now let's try to do the same thing with changing here. So again, I'm putting name on this just to make sure that if we change name, it can be separate, and we will also see where is get name, because right now we have put that on the on the prototype, and then the same way we have created 2 objects. Now we're gonna see the dir of that. So here name is of course local because you have put name on this, but there is no get name here. So where is that? Well, you have to expand the prototype because now you have to go up into the prototype chain, and there you will see get name. So which is good. Here as well you have the same copy of the name, and then your get name is still on the same parent class, or not class actually, parent object. So we have get name here. So both are referring to the same get name. And just to be confirmed with that issue, let's just make this one as well on the name. So now every property here in the parent is on the prototype. So these two are sharing the same thing, name as well as get name. So you won't find anything locally, everything will be on the prototype or on the base. Now if someone tries to change obj1 dot name, now there will be another interesting thing. First of all, they won't be able to change anything on the prototype of its parent. So what would happen if you try to do something like this? Let's see. So we have object 1, and we thought, okay, we created an instance of my object, which is here, and then we are now trying to change the name here. Well, if you see what JavaScript would do, which is very good, it will create local property with the name name and the value this, and it will not even touch anything on the prototype. Prototype it's still, or the name on the prototype is still unknown. So because what you are doing here is you are just saying, okay, create a new property on this object, not on the prototype. So that's what happens. How to get access to the prototype property? Well, in that case, you can go via this method or this property. But again, as I said, this is not the good approach. So what if you want to change something on the values or the properties on the prototype? Well, the best solution would be to create a function, call it something like set name, pass name from here, and then make sure that my object.name, I don't have to return actually, is equals to n. So now you have one setter available from on the parent. So now instead of using all this, you can do something like call that setter, which is set name, and then send this guy to the top. So that's what we did. We said, okay, change name, which is here. Let's see. Of course, this will not also be true, but let's see about this. So we see which has no name still unknown. The reason is we have changed the value on the local property on the my object and not on the prototype. So yeah, if you do something like this, then you are good. If you go there, now your name is whatever you typed, and both are having the same value now, because you using one object you have changed the shared things or shared properties. So everybody will be having updated reference or updated value because these values are shared, because these are on the prototype of the parent. So yep, this is important. Now again, in this case, you will see that unlike in the previous case where every object was getting its own individual copy of all of the properties, because we were using this, here you will just pass everything on the, or everything is on the parent, so of course they are shared. Okay, so yep, this is the example here. There's two different things, and this will make sure that your inherited objects get independent copy. In case of prototype, well, you will use the same copy of the property from the parent. Saves memory. Well, it's much more than that. You are properly implementing inheritance, plus you are using the feature code reuse, right? That's why you use inheritance. You want to share the code to the inherited object so that you are not writing too much of things. So this is the difference between this versus prototype. Now so there was one question regarding multiple inheritance, right? So let's do that one. It will be a little complex, but where is this? Hold on. Oh, it was not here. It was somewhere. 2-3 lines down the line, not here. Or 2-3 slides down the line. Before that, I have a question. At any time, do local properties have priority over inherited properties by the same name? Yes, local properties will always have priority in any language, actually. And that is the meaning of overriding, right? So since we have talked about this prototype, now we have access to the prototype, right? So what about changing or adding prototype or new properties on the already existing objects? Something like this. So we have array object already there in the browsers implemented properly using ECMAScript, everything. Now you thought, okay, there is one method missing that you require every time, which is my uppercase. So what this method should do is just uppercase all of the elements inside that array. So you'll see, okay, I'm using this method many times. Can I change the prototype of the array itself and then add my own method onto the prototype so that I can use it later on normal arrays? Well, you can do that. You shouldn't be doing that, but you can do that. You shouldn't be messing up with the real objects which are available by default in the browser or in the window. What you should be doing in the real case is kind of creating one wrapper around these objects. But in this case, we are just learning how, if we want to change the prototype of the existing object itself. So what I did, I just got a reference to the prototype of the array, because as you know, when you create an array, what your JavaScript is doing actually is creating an object based on the array.prototype. So you have to put your new property or new function on the prototype of the array. And this is very stupid function doing nothing but just looping over the array. And then for every element it is converting into uppercase. So for example, here you have created this array and you want to call this super awesome method. Stupid. So what you can do is you can just call it and then it will return you, not return you actually, the fruits array will become capitalized like this. So of course you can always alter the prototype of your existing objects as well. So that is allowed. Before that, I have one question. If you use a static instance of the inherited function, it acts as the same way. So what do you mean by static instance of inherited function? if you use static instance of the inherited function.
Like we just you just mentioned previously, like we were using a static instance of a function.
Okay, you mean
And
something like this.
yeah,
So I mean, what is your question now?
like it inherits all the like the properties of the function if we use a static instance of the inherited function. Like,
So of course this getName will not be available on the inherited object because not this
okay,
is not in the prototype. If you go
okay,
there, you see there is nothing called getName
okay,
because it's no longer provided by the prototype. So only properties which are defined on the prototype of the parent will be available to the instances, nothing else. So if you want to make sure that something is safe, don't declare it on the prototype. So it's kind of private methods or private variables. If this is variable, this is a property, not a function. In that case, you can save this for the private, and then everything that you have on the prototype will be kind of protected. Okay, coming back to here, so again you can do something like this, and then of course you can alter the behavior of your existing objects as well, or if you want to override some existing function, like let's say you don't like slice or splice, or you don't like sort, you want to implement it some other way, just override this, use sort here on the prototype, and then define your own function, and then screw up your entire application. Who cares? So yeah, that's all you can do using prototype as well. But again, all of the good developers will tell you don't do this thing because of, again, you shouldn't be messing up with already defined objects, and of course not even thinking about messing up with already existing functions, because you can rarely would be the case that your function will be optimized just like other. But yeah, for the polyfills, for example, index of, which is not available in case of I think I8. So if you go to string dot prototype index of, in case of string as well, sorry, so if you scroll down, it is only available, okay, wrong place, array index of, yep, not string index of. So this array index of is only available in IE9 or higher. Of course nobody cares about compatibility with Chrome or Firefox, it's always the IE. So there is a polyfill for that. Polyfill means some more JavaScript that you can write for the browsers which does not understand these new things. So what you can do here, you can always check. So this is the JavaScript that you can write to allow use of index, and in those cases only your prototype is fine if you change the prototype, because you are trying to provide this behavior to IE8 or any browser below IE9 in this case. So what you are checking first is, well, if array.prototype is index of is already defined. If it is already defined, meaning you are using a better browser. If it is not, then probably you are on one of the older browsers like IE8 or IE7 or those one. In that case, define this new one. And again, whenever you want to use it, you can directly use on your arrays. So yep, I mean it's very long discussion. I think mostly there are comments, but yeah, that's how you can do it. Coming back here, so of course this is a prototype inheritance, and since you have defined or altered something on the prototype, every instance of array will have access to that method. Now someone was talking about multi-level inheritance, right? So let's see. So again, we saw that some very normal object. One property is on this, other property is on prototype. So only this getter function will be shared. The real value will be local to all these instances. So we have this now. Now you want to have multi-level inheritance where my object should be inherited by some intermediate object, and then you are creating an instance of that intermediate object. Well, if you use new like this here, it is not possible, because now you cannot put prototype dot prototype on this obj1. As I said, the prototype is only available on the functions, so there is no way to do that just via this. So now there is another approach, and that will involve some of the new methods on object, which is object.create, again not available in IE8. So of course this type of things you have to write polyfill for that, for IE8, just like you wrote for what index of what I am saying, index of. So here as well, I mean, you can write this polyfill, and that of course everything will be working. So let's see what we are doing here. You can try this example running in Plunker. So I have a person object, which is top level or the base one. Then I have defined a get name on the prototype of the person. So we are just saying return this name. So this is the base class, or the base definition, or the base object. Now we have created another one, intermediate, which is an engineer, and we are asking two properties or two arguments here as well. Now for the first one, what we do, we call person.apply and then pass, and since we are using this, of course everything is attached to that particular object that will, or instance that will create later on, and then we pass the name. So person is properly initialized or created, and then of course you have the field which is local to engineer, while the name was on the parent of engineer, which is person. So this is the base, this is the intermediate definition. Now what is the problem with this one? Well, you are good as long as invoking an engineer or creating an instance of the engineer, but if you want to maintain the chain from, so let's say what we are doing later on, forget about these two lines now. We have created one more function on the prototype of the engineer, which is an intermediate object, and then something, this dot get name, which will be coming from the parent, and its own field which is coming from, of course, the local engineer. Ultimately we are creating an instance of engineer, and we are passing the required things. What we want to do now, of course, we will be printing what is CS engineer, what is the structure of CS engineer actually, what if you use get name, so of course it has to come from its grandparent, which is person, and the get detail info will come from engineer, because this is a multi-level now, person to engineer, engineer to CS engineer. So this is the way you do it. Now the problem is, if you want to check the proto property, which is reverse lookup to up toward the prototype chain, well, that will be messed up if you don't do something like this. So now over here in these two lines, what you are doing is you are setting the prototype of engineer from person's prototype, because you want to extend your superclass, which is person, or you want to extend subclass from the superclass, something like that. So that's why you have to create, or you have to use object.create. In that case you are manually doing it, because you don't want to create an object kind of engineer equals to new or new person, because that is not useful here in this case. Ultimately your instance would be at the CS engineer, and that's where you will be using new, the only time that you will be using new, not here. Because as long as you start using new here, you cannot put prototype property on CS engineer. We just saw in the previous case, right? So yeah, this is one way, and this is again instructing that, okay, the constructor of engineer's prototype would be engineer. This is just to fix the issue in the proto references. That's it. Once you do that, then when you run this entire code, you will have proper chain. Let's do it. So this is the CS engineer that you are printing here. So we are printing CS engineer, right? So we will see its entire prototype chain. So of course it has two common fields, two local fields, field and name. And why these are local to itself or instance level? Because for these fields we are using this keyword here as well. So of course field and name are local to the CS engineer guy, but all the functions are properly on their own objects. So of course, the CS engineer is a type of engineer object, and that's where you put the constructor to point it to engineer itself, and now it has a get detailed info, because get detailed info is on the prototype of the engineer, so we are good here. And then again reverse, I mean engineer is an instance of the person, because you did here the upper line number 15, and if you expand that, there you will be having get name, because get name, which was on the person's prototype, of course it's a third level up from CS engineer. So that's how you can create multi-level inheritance as well. But again, this was just for the example. Nobody would ask this question to you. So yeah, it can also be created, but in most of the times you won't even need this type of difficult or complex structure, unless you are trying to create some entirely new framework. So you can change the existing prototype or the prototype of the existing objects. You can have multi-level inheritance as well, or mimic multi-level inheritance via prototype inheritance as well. You can't do the reverse. So one thing. Now let's talk about iterating over array and object. So I have not talked about the for loops, right? So far about iterating over array and object. So let's talk about now, because this is the best point. And because we know the issue, why you shouldn't be using one version of the for loop against another in different cases. So we saw the prototype property, and then we also saw that, or we also understood that, okay, your developers or even you will be excited to change prototype properties of existing objects, especially array and object. So of course, in that case, if you do that, your iteration over array and object may not result in what you thought. So for example, this is a normal object that you have created, some name, age, city, and state, right? This is the object literal actually you have created, and then somewhere, doesn't matter here on this line, it can be anywhere in your application, in some other script, or in, let's say you have downloaded some stupid plugin as well, jQuery plugin, and that guy is now, or that has put some custom property on the prototype of object. You don't know that, right? So you directly went and then tried to loop using for loop, because that's the only thing that you can use for looping over the objects in the plain JavaScript. So you use that, which is for in loop, key in object, and you said, okay, let's print everything, whatever we have in the object. Well, you will be amazed to see that you will get all these properties plus few more, depending on how many prototype or how many times your prototype have been altered. The reason is this for loop is stupid. Well, for loop is not stupid actually. The developer who has done this is stupid. So here you see name is there, age is there, city there, state there. So we are fine until now. Suddenly you will see, well, what is this? Some function. You didn't put that into here. From where it is coming? Then there are 100% chances that your application somewhere is doing something like this, where somebody has, or even you have put some custom property on the prototype of the object in this case. And if you do something like that, well, screw your looping. Now you can't even depend whether if you want to, let's say, calculate how many number of keys you have. Well, you cannot do that now, because it will not return you correct things or correct result. So how to avoid this issue? Well, so let's first, of course, you will have this, and then this is the question, where is this coming from? So how to avoid this issue? So there is one method on every object, and which is called has on property. So to be safe in this kind of scenario, you should, whenever you use for in loop in the objects, because that's the only loop that you can be using in objects. So whenever you use that, use this if condition somewhere in that loop. And what you are saying, or what this has on property will do, it will restrict looping over the properties which are not part of this object itself. Because if you see this sum function, it is part of the prototype of the parent of the obj, not this instance itself. So now here you are restricting, or you are asking loop only, or go inside this only when this key is own property of the object. Or I mean, even if you read in the simple English, you are asking if this object has own property with the name key, then only go inside this loop, otherwise escape. So this is the way you should be handling it. And then if you try this, really, I didn't give the example, then of course you won't be having that issue, that looping over any other prototype property. So we are safe in this case. And this problem is not even limited to object only. Even arrays are affected with this approach. So if you do something like this, then again somebody has put some custom property on the prototype of the array in your application manually, then whenever you use for in loop for arrays, because in case of arrays you can use either for in loop or your traditional loop as well. So if you use for in loop there as well, then you have to be sure that you use this line, and you want to check if array has its own property or if its own value with the index 0, 1, 2, 3. If you don't do that, then again the same thing, your sum function will be part of this length, and if you even try to do array.length, you will get some func. So in this case the result will be 5 for the length. Well, I said wrong. Length is local property. Let's check it, because I'm sure length is not affected. Length is local property. So you are safe here. Let's try array.length. It is not on the prototype actually. So we'll of course get 4. And that's why, since your length property is not affected, instead of using this for in loop in case of array, you should always be using your traditional loop, which is the best approach with the arrays, because length property is local to the current object, not to its prototype. So if you see there, if you see the structure of the ARR, which is here, you will see length is 4, because length is implemented on using this keyword, while all other things are implemented using prototype. So that's why even your sum function is on the prototype, so you are safe with length. And this is the reason you should be using your classical or your traditional for loop as far as arrays are concerned, to avoid this issue. Of course, for objects you have no other way but to go with this approach. But in case of arrays, you can always safely go with your traditional loops, index I less than length, index plus plus. In that case, as I told you, this length guy is local to the array and not on the prototype, so it's not counting the prototype also. So you are safe in this case. Okay, so that's how you should be aware of these issues. If someone in your application has changed the prototype of the common objects like array, string, number, object itself, so you should be aware with these issues. Okay, so I'm stopping here now, and then from tomorrow we will start DOM manipulation. So until now we were just covering the core concepts of JavaScript, or kind of core JavaScript, and tomorrow we will just start using it for DOM manipulation, for styling, for event handling, for Ajax. We will start learning those things. If you have any question, let me know. Otherwise you should be going through this slides again tonight, otherwise you will forget everything. There may be some new concepts, or for many of you they may all be newer concepts. So go through these slides again, so that at least you know the basics of JavaScript before starting any other library or some other JavaScript framework. So there is one question: I cannot view the slides even after the download. Oh boy, so how did you download? So let me tell you how did you download. So what you did actually, you went to the folder, you went to the presentation folder, and you downloaded these individual files and probably these folders individually, right? So don't do that. Go to the out or the root folder, because this is root folder in your case. Go to the presentation, right click, and then click on download. Where is download? here. Once you download, extract, so you will be, because it will be downloaded as zip, and then when you extract it, you will be having all here. If you open resources, you will be having folder structure right away. And then if you start just in the browser, you will see the first screen, and then use your arrow keys on the keyboard. Mouse doesn't work or may not work, I'm not sure. So use arrow keys to navigate among the various slides. Okay, question. Is there something like interface in JavaScript? Nope. Not needed. Any other question? Okay then. What is today? 10th. Tomorrow is your submission, and I think the deadline is somewhere in the night. Yep, 11:59 EDT. And then try to submit it before. What you have to do is just use combine, just create some sort of directory structure, something of this sort. No, not this. Yeah, something like this. You have images, you will be having scripts, you will be having styles, and you will be having all the HTML files. Now forget about this grunt and package and this client docs and everything. So you will be having some sort of structure, and then just go to the top level, zip it. Try to use zip, not the rar. I don't like rar, the stupid archiving system. So if you don't have zip, which is default in case of Windows, but still if you don't like, I mean, download 7-zip. It is free tool, open source. So yeah, use that one and create the zip with the name, first name underscore last name, and then just go to direct messages in your Slack, find out me somewhere in this list, and for example here, go there and upload the file. So upload that zip file. That's it. That's what you have to do. Yep, there was some question, what will you be looking into the more specific in the codes? Of course, I'm going to look the design. So what are your aesthetics? And of course, the HTML and CSS coding standards. This is important than the first part. I don't even care if you use some colors that I don't like, because again, design can be subjective. And most of the times, the developers don't have control over the design in the companies, unless you are too good with your design or you have impressed with your boss with your design so that he can depend on you for the design. But still, for your initial days, I mean, you will be getting, or even for most time, you will be getting what do you call it, layout wireframes from someone, or even entire Photoshop design. You have to just implement it. You are gonna be UI developer, not the UI designers. So I'm not even worried about that, but at least, I mean, I will check whether you have made sure that simple things are there, like the forms for creating a reservation is proper, the proper fields are there, proper input types you are using, the table is looking properly, and then of course I will check the responsiveness of the page as well, or the pages. But my more or the higher concentration will be on this HTML and CSS coding standards. So something like, if you try to use so many BR tags, nope. Or if you use some weird sort of JavaScript, not JavaScript actually, the CSS, not good. If you put your scripts into head, not good at all. If you put all of your files into single folder, I will just throw it. Okay, where are we using table? Interesting question. Where are we using table? I don't know. If you don't want to use table, not here, A3. Something like this. For reservation list, if you are using something else, you are fine. But I would go with the table in this case, because I can assume, or I can think right now that, okay, I can put this data into database and it would be something like that. If I can think that, I will be using table on the UI as well, or something like this, because the data itself is tabular in semantic or in the meaning. So of course I'm not using table just for the layout here, it is just for the data. So yep, prepare, work on that. You have almost 27 hours, 28 hours, or whatever you call it. Work on that one, and I think, how many of you are there today? 20. So I'm not sure how many submissions will be there, but whatever is the number, I will send your performance to each in. Okay, so work on that, and tomorrow we will start with the DOM manipulation things like window object, the document or elements, events, and then Ajax. So probably Saturday. Probably in the first hour of the Saturday we'll be finishing JavaScript. Or if we stretch tomorrow, we can also finish JavaScript tomorrow as well. But we'll see. Bye bye. Good night.